points regarding the conclusion that the original disciples did not consider Jesus God. The disciples were Jewish monotheists. Well, we know that for a fact. Everybody agrees on that. We don't have to prove that now to everybody who agrees on it. What does that imply? It implies that if you do not have any evidence to the contrary, you should not assume that they took anyone other than Yahweh or Jehovah for God. He says we don't have any documentary evidence, and I didn't present any. What about the Old Testament? The Old Testament is there before Christianity, and this proves conclusively that there is no other God but Yahweh. There are great preachers, there is the Son of Man of Daniel, but that Son of Man is not God. Actually, it's not the Son of Man. It is one like a Son of Man. You get your terminology accurate here, James. So that's one like the Son of Man. Some people have taken it and made it into Jesus and pretended that that means that Jesus is God. But in the book of Daniel, the one like a Son of Man is a great angelic being, true, but that is not God. The Ancient of Days is the one who is God, and this one, like the Son of Man, approaches the Ancient of Days, comes up to his throne, and that shows that they're two separate, different beings. The speeches and Acts of the Apostles. Well, since we do not have dependable speeches from the disciples, and we have a document in the New Testament, Acts of the Apostles, which is said to be written by one of the traveling companions of Paul, and that document presents the disciples as in some way teaching Pauline doctrine, that becomes suspect. 3, I said that there are no writings of the original disciples, and I mentioned 2 Peter. So if we stick with the original 12 disciples, we know that Judas Iscariot, one of them betrayed Jesus, so he's out. That leaves 11. And then Matthias is added then to make 12. Okay, of these 12 disciples, do you have any original writings from them? No. We have 2 letters which are said to be from Peter, and I've quoted scholars who have said that these are not Peter's letters. So then, what do we have? We have a situation where scholars are studying in this university, in every university in the world, scholars are studying things in detail. And in modern studies, we take a detached perspective, a disinterested approach to what we're studying. We don't want to force our conclusion onto what we're studying. We just study things and let the conclusions speak for themselves to us. Of course, everyone has a bias, and one has to be aware of his own bias and try to overcome it as much as possible. But this is what peer review is about. Somebody comes up with a theory because he wants to get published, and then he gets scathing critical reviews from his peers. And then he's sorry that he actually said something like that. But what happens eventually is that as a result of this peer review process, eventually the better ideas stick around and the not so good ideas get shoved away into the wayside. Nobody wants to hold on to those ideas. It becomes embarrassing in scholarly circles because further studies are being done and from the same disinterested perspective. When scholars then come up with these conclusions, we cannot just brush the scholars away. But James wants to brush all of these scholars away because James wants to hold on to certain traditional Christian beliefs which become questionable in the light of modern studies and discoveries. And he's saying, well, Shabir, you should be afraid of the boogeyman scholar as well because watch out, they're going to come to the Quran now and they're going to say things about the Quran. So be afraid of those scholars, don't quote them, run away from them. And I say, why should we be afraid of scholarship? Why should we be afraid of reasoning, of discovery, of study, of examination? Why should we be afraid of truth? If somebody comes up with the truth, let's know what it is and let's follow it. He says that somebody said Muhammad does not exist. People have claimed that, but that did not become scholarly consensus. Even among non-Muslim scholars, in fact, they think that this is a wild idea to say that Muhammad did not exist. In fact, a certain scholar, Patricia Crone, together with Michael Cook, had written a book in which they had tried to prove such things, but later on they themselves abandoned their own ideas. So the idea does not actually hold, although some people who want to somehow disprove Islam, whether by hook or crook, will still try to champion those ideas. I know James doesn't do that, but all James is telling me is, Shabir, be afraid of the boogeyman scholar. And I'm saying, well, I'm not afraid. Let the scholars come, let us talk to them, and debate with them. Let's find out what they have discovered, and if their discoveries are good, it's based on reason, evidence, and proof, we'll follow that. If we need to adjust or modify our faith in some way to deal with the facts, well, we'll do that. But so far, you cannot just imagine that the scholars will come up and tell us something that we will not agree with. He says, well, the same scholars I'm citing reject the virgin birth of Jesus, and they reject the miracles of Jesus, things that Muslims will accept. Well then, how would we respond to that? Scholars have a number of presuppositions and a number of approaches that they're using. As a Muslim, I will not take all of what the scholars are saying. I will take those things which are proven with evidence and conclusive proof, things which commend themselves to me as a believer in faith. I can take two approaches. One is a purely historical approach, assuming I know nothing about the religion of Islam. And then as a second stage, I can ask, okay, having taken that historical approach and seen what the scholars are saying, how does that affect my faith? Do I need to adjust something in my faith? Or is there something in the scholarship that is not quite right that I need to go down deeper into and discover? And when I do that,
I should repeat this comment. Guys, this is not on. This is a debate. You listen here. And I'm seriously, we will just judge you away if that happens again.
Sorry if I said anything the wrong way. I don't mean to provoke anyone or anything like this. So what I'm saying is that I will pay attention to the scholarship, and then as a second stage, I will ask, how does this scholarship affect my faith? Do I need to adjust something, or do I need to go back to that scholarship and see if it's really based on sound evidence and proof that it first appeared to be? Now, after doing this kind of homework, I am satisfied with my faith as a Muslim. I don't feel that there's any scholarship out there that has actually disproved the key things that Muslims believe in, and I have no reason to fear the scholar as a boogeyman. And I can still continue to believe in the Quran as the Word of God. And many of the scholars that we are referring to, who are scholars of the Christian Bible, I'm referring to them as scholars in their own field. They're not scholars of the Quran. So I would refer to scholars of the Quran for Quranic matters, and scholars of the New Testament for New Testament matters, scholars of the Old Testament for Old Testament matters, every scholar in his field. And a scholar who speaks outside of this field of expertise is just like another lay person. We might take his opinion or leave it, and it's not worth anything more than the opinion of a lay person. So in short, James has not given us any reason for ignoring modern scholarship, except that the modern scholarship threatens what he believes, and he's warning Muslims that if you adopt the modern scholarship, then you will also be threatened in your faith. I don't believe that to be a true threat. I showed that Paul is in conflict with the original disciples of Jesus. It is clear that Paul would found a church, he would write letters to them, and then he would have to write letters to them again, warning them about the false apostles. Who are the false apostles? It turns out that Paul was teaching one thing and the original disciples of Jesus another thing. For example, when it came to the practice of the law, Paul was challenged in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15, and then Paul was made to go out and proclaim the food laws, which from his own writings we know he wouldn't have proclaimed. Romans chapter 14 verse 20 says that all foods are clean. And then in chapter 21 of Acts, he was challenged again to perform the sacrifices in the Jerusalem temple. And as all Christians know, Jesus died as a sacrifice once and for all. There are no more sacrifices for Christians to make. But we see now in Acts of the Apostles that the disciples were making sacrifices, and now they made Paul also perform animal sacrifices, which we know from his letters he shouldn't have done. And this shows that there was a deep-seated rift between Paul and the original disciples of Jesus. And key for our study tonight is that some of these original disciples were going around preaching, according to Paul, another Jesus. So if we have the one Jesus that is known from Paul's writings, and there is another Jesus that we know little about, we can only speculate because we don't have original documents from the original disciples of Jesus, I'm asking you now, who was that original Jesus? And I'm saying that when we look at the Gospels, we can see that there is an original Jesus who appears in Mark, and yes, not everything in Mark is authentic. As John Golden said, just as the later Gospels improved the status of Jesus, Mark would have done the same thing as well, and we would only be able to prove this conclusively when we find a prior document to Mark. But the fact that we cannot prove it conclusively does not allow us to omit the trend and see that it went this way, and Jesus was down there from the beginning. Thank you very much.